Fujifilm X-Trans cameras have a pretty cool secret that not very many people know about, and that is the fact that they can shoot in infrared. Now, this is a completely standard, unmodified Fujifilm X100V, and today I'm going to show you how you can get photos like this with absolutely no post-processing whatsoever. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about what infrared photography is. Infrared light is something that humans can't see because it is outside what we call the visible light spectrum. Now, when cameras are made, they are made to photograph pretty much just what we can see. So they're made to take photos of all of the light inside the visible light spectrum. Naturally, camera sensors can see infrared light, something to do with how they're made. So what manufacturers do is they put an infrared light blocking filter in front of the sensor. This means that it blocks out all the infrared light and everything that the cameras can see is just inside the visible light spectrum. Now, you can actually send your camera away to a company which will convert your camera to infrared. I think what they do is they take out that sensor and then I don't know if they put something in that blocks normal light or anything like that. This is something that is typically cost about £400 or £500, and you have to sacrifice a camera for it because when it comes back, it won't be able to photograph anything other than infrared, so you kind of lose the ability for it to just be like a normal camera. Fujifilm, being the absolute legends that they are, for some reason put a really weak infrared blocking filter in front of all of their X-Trans sensors, and I don't know why that they've chose to do this, but it's really good for photographers because it means that with one little trick, you can actually use your Fujifilm X-Trans sensor to photograph infrared light. However, Fuji cameras are still made to photograph all visible light. So what we need to do is we need to use one of these little filters that you put in front of the lens, and what this does is it blocks out all visible light and only lets infrared light through. So this is a Hoya R72 filter. I'm going to put a link to it in the description below if you want to check it out. When you look at it, it looks totally black. If you hold it up to your eye like that, you can very faintly see some light through it in red, but for the most part it blocks out pretty much everything. If you have an X100 series camera and haven't used a filter before, you will need a filter ring. Fujifilm offer one, it's quite expensive. I'm going to put a cheaper one in the description that works just as well, so there'll be a link down there if you want to check that out. As you can see from this comparison, it is a dramatic difference from shooting with the filter to shooting without the filter. It makes grass like totally white, it makes trees totally white, it makes the sky really dark, and it just makes everything look a little bit weird. I guess it looks a bit like night vision. I think a lot of night vision cameras use infrared stuff too, but yeah, it's just a really cool, unique look. Now, to get the best out of these files, I've created a custom recipe for Fujifilm cameras that you can dial in the settings, and this will give you the most dramatic looking infrared photos. Without a recipe, they look kind of cool, but a lot of the time they're quite washed out. So I've set this recipe to shift the white balance a bit and increase the contrast a bit to just kind of really bring out the white in the trees and the darkness of the sky and really just accentuate that infrared look. You can obviously shoot in RAW if you would like. Your RAW files will come out totally red, so we'll need either convert into black and white, or there is a way that you can convert them to color, but it's a bit of a chew on. I've not really tried it. You have to kind of do some stuff with custom picture profiles, and to be honest, I think they look really cool in black and white. And I just like the fact that you can get this look straight from the camera. I don't really want to be messing around in Photoshop for ages and manipulating colors and stuff like that. I like the look straight from the camera, so I like to shoot in black and white. So like most experimental photography techniques, it's not without limitations. So let's talk about those and how we can combat them. First off, the filter blocks a lot of light that comes into the camera. It's basically like putting a pair of really dark red sunglasses on, so we're going to need to compensate for that loss of light. So there are three things that we need to do. First up, we're going to open our aperture all the way to f2 to let in the most amount of light. And secondly, we need to do one of two things. We need to increase the ISO, which is like the sensitivity of the camera sensor, or we need to allow the shutter speed to be slower so that we can let in more light. Now, the disadvantage of opening the shutter for a long time is that you will get motion blur, and therefore you will need to put your camera on a tripod. Now, I love the fact that the Fuji is so small, you can carry it anywhere. The last thing I want to do is carry a big tripod around to put it on, so I opted for the second option, which was boosting the ISO. I think for most of these shots, I was on ISO 10,000 or 12,800, which is fine, but your photos are going to come out pretty grainy. I didn't really have a problem with this. I think the photos look kind of surreal anyway, so I'm happy with having a bit of film grain on it. But that is worth mentioning. If you don't want film grain or noise, digital noise, or whatever you want to call it, if you don't want grain on your images, you are going to need to use a tripod, which is a bit of a pain. However, I don't know, if you're doing landscape shots, that might not be an issue to you, but I couldn't be bothered. The second thing is that it only really works when the sun's really bright. I think it's something to do with the sun giving off infrared. Do you know, I'm not even going to try and explain it because I don't even know. I'm not even going to pretend that I know. But when the sun's shining really bright, it works best. When the sun is not shining, it doesn't really work at all. Everything just looks grey and washed out, and it doesn't even look infrared. It just looks a bit weird. So you need bright sunlight for this. The final thing is that with it being so dark, on older cameras especially, you might not be able to autofocus through the filter. The X100V didn't really have an issue with this at all, but I maybe think on older cameras like the first X100 and maybe like the XT1 or the XT2, they might have a bit of an issue focusing through it. The way to combat this is to focus without the filter on, then switch your camera to manual and then put the filter on, and that way your shot will be in focus. Or you can use the live view, but just be aware that because you're shooting at a really high ISO, the live view image is going to be quite grainy, so it might be quite hard to manual focus this way. I would fully recommend everyone to get their hands on one of these and just go out and experiment. I found it really fun to try something new. I don't think the photos, they're not the best photos I've ever taken, but it is really cool that your camera can see light that you can't see. And I don't know, I feel like you get to see like another world that humans can't see. Maybe it's not that deep, but I just thought it was really cool, and I thought I would share the information with you guys. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more content, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps the channel, and I will see you in the next one.